Chapter 27. The Law of Impaction. The true method of impaction is but little known because it involves the inner principle of polarity. Impaction may be defined as the act of bringing a force of a subtler plane through to a denser plane upon the involutionary arc. This must be distinguished from degradation. Degradation is a similar act upon the evolutionary arc. We speak of the degradation of the sublimation of a force upon the evolutionary arc, and of impaction and disintegration upon the involutionary arc. An important concept concerning the dynamic standard of good and evil is contained in this distinction. Impaction, then, is the act of advancing a force in evolution by developing it upon the form aspect. You must remember that the stream of evolving life issuing from the Logos has to descend into matter in order to be organized, and having developed form, by its confinement in matter, it uses that form as a mold, or more strictly speaking, a framework for the subtler surrounds the dense. And when the framework of the dense is withdrawn, the subtle maintains the form it assumed because the system of stresses then developed has become a habit. The act of sublimation is to separate the dense from the subtle, but the act of impaction is to lock two tangential forces into a node of the dense. This, you'll perceive, was the method of the creation of the atoms. The act of impaction is based upon the use of the laws of the attraction of the center and the attraction of the circumference, and the use of polarity. And in all elaborations of the concept of polarity, the law of impaction comes into function because polarity gives rise to impaction. Impaction depends on polarity, wherein union takes place horizontally and fission takes place vertically. More has been said than you realize. Chapter 28. The Law of Polarity. It is impossible to consider the law of polarity without considering the laws of the attraction of the center and the attraction of the circumference, because polarity has its basis in these two laws. It is according to whether the attraction be towards the center or the circumference that the negative or positive aspects of force are observed. The attraction towards the center gives the negative, and the attraction towards the circumference the positive aspect, and it is these two in polarity that produce the circulation of force. You see the prototype of which this is the correspondence in the positive and negative aspects of the cosmic days. The glyph of this is contained in the caduceus of Mercury. There you see the black and white serpents of positive and negative function twined from side to side of the staff. Taken in its mundane aspect, the staff represents the ray, and the black and white serpents the positive and negative aspects of the life wave. There is also another aspect of polarity in regard to group form. The consciousness of a group is an entity of a negative or female type. It requires to be stimulated by a positive force before it can become creative. That which functions on a subtler plane is positive in relation to that which functions on a denser plane. Should a consciousness conceive the aims of a group on a higher plane than that on which the group conceives them, it becomes positive towards that group and thereby can fertilize it. When fertilization of a group occurs, each of the individuals of that group becomes pregnant with a new concept and brings creative work to birth upon the physical plane. They will then have conceived that which the group leader has begotten, and will then be upon the same plane as the leader. Having conceived the same ideal, they will then be of the same polarity as a leader, and it will no longer be possible for him to bring a creative stimulus to the group. This will explain to you the process of fluorescence and quiescence, which groups undergo. Periods of quiescence are not of necessary death. You will observe that throughout all manifested life, the cooperation of two factors is essential for all form building. Force, however, works as a unit because its polarity is in the Logos. Chapter 29. The Law of the Attraction of Outer Space. In considering the law of the attraction of outer space, we have first to inquire how it is that the attraction of outer space is able to overcome the attraction of the center. In order to understand this problem, we have to consider certain basic aspects of the universe which have been previously described. The logoidal consciousness, having attained equilibrium, has achieved perfection, and having attained that which it had conceptually realized, propounds a further conception and seeks its realization. Those formal concepts already conceived within these logoidal consciousness are continued into more complex synthesis, thereby partaking of the nature of successively developed phases of manifestation, or to express the same idea in another terminology, passed outward down the planes of manifestation. The growing points of the logos are projected into manifestation as evolutionary impulses, and the logos gives the thrust outward which protects a form, ensouling them with life. Now it is ever the aim of will to function unconditioned, just as it is ever the tendency of form to condition the unmanifest, and the will to live of the logos, always entering upon the conditioning form, which, as it were, it pushes ahead of itself down the planes, is irked by form, but in later phases of the logoidal life unconditioned will is impossible, all action being determined by pre-existing conditions. And the will to live of the logos, which is the life of the manifested universe, has to submit to conditions and be bound in form. Hence the warfare between spirit and flesh. The will to live of the logos, then, expresses itself through succeeding phases of form, until the densest phase is reached. It can no further project the conditioning vehicle of its manifestation, and it strives to free itself from the bondage of form and continue onward, to employ a metaphor of space, towards those areas of the ether which have not been circumscribed and conditioned by the primal logoidal will. First, it is the endeavor of conditioned life to become unconditioned which forms the prime urge, which projects it towards outer space. Secondly, there is the natural tendency towards equilibrium, and of the forces under high pressure within a manifest universe to diffuse themselves into the comparative vacuum of outer space. Thirdly, there is the picture of the penumbra, all these molds which are marred in the making, all those evolutionary concepts which fail in their realization, all misplaced forces and souls that have failed in their task, being rejected by their individualities, all that in fact which is desired to reject from the logoidal consciousness, and which have not been disintegrated against the inner shell of the ring pass not, remains as an image in the reflecting ether of space, upon what may be figuratively termed the outer surface of the ring pass not, immediately between that and the ring chaos of the universe, and there may be described. Any consciousness, then, which ventures to the nether side of matter, will discern across the great gulf, which is the ring pass not of the universe, the reflected images of all falsified hopes and abortive attempts at manifestation. And these, as it were, craving for the force which should bring them into manifestation, call across the gulf to whatever elements are akin to them in that which presents itself at the barrier. And so it is that all evolving force, whether in the universe or in the individual, having penetrated to fundamentals, look across the great gulf fixed by cosmic law, and see the simulacra of its hopeless dreams, promising fulfillments, and it is tempted to continue forward on the path of outgoing upon which the divine momentum projected it, and by means of the further momentum acquired by its own motion, to leap that gulf into the freedom of outer space, where there is no law and men are as gods. For when a unit of consciousness is freed from a manifested universe by transcending law, law being consummated in a perfect obedience, it becomes the nucleating center of a new logoidal sun. This is the mystery of the Godhead. But when a unit of consciousness that has not fulfilled the law escapes its unconditioned will, this is the mystery of evil, positive evil, personified as devil. This temptation of the nadir comes to all in the course of evolution. From the divine upon the outgoing arc, life has to penetrate into the fundamentals, and having touched the fundamentals, having attained the summit of its power, it has to reject the temptation of the desire image reflected from the outer space, and retrace its steps in humility back to the source of its life, winning the realization that freedom is attained not by escape from limitation and conditions, but by adjusting the balance to a perfect equilibrium. Equilibrium of conflicting forces being attained, form is stereotyped and can be left to develop the corresponding consciousness, and the ensouling life withdraws to a higher plane, bearing with it the reaction capacity acquired in the lower plane, but no longer bound by the conditions of that plane. This will be dealt with more fully in the succeeding lecture. The attraction of outer space, then, is the attraction of unconditioned power. It is the temptation to escape from the laws that have built us up and to exercise the powers gained under these laws without the equivalent responsibility. This may be seen exemplified in the life of a man who, enjoying all the advantages of a highly developed culture, brings to them the aims and the ideals of an unevolved state of existence. The attraction of outer space is the temptation to break away from evolution and the cosmic law and to function as a god. Such gods are those who are propitiated in the rites of devil worship. Chapter 30. The Law of the Attraction of the Center. The law of the attraction of the center contains the secret of the mystery of love. It may be considered under three aspects. First, in relation to evolution. Secondly, in relation to initiation. And thirdly, in relation to devolution and the left-hand path. 1. In relation to evolution. When a form of life has attained its utmost complexity in material organization, unification begins. This is obtained by means of the synthesis of principle upon a higher plane, and this having been secured, devolution of the physical form sets in. This marks a transition through the nadir of the evolutionary arc. Let us elaborate this concept. Ideas of life expression having been evolved by entities of a higher grade than life form under consideration are projected upon these life forms in the etheric kingdom as they are approaching materialization. And in the malleable matter of the etheric type, they are worked out, and this acts as a framework for the subsequent physical form. The life forces, compelled to circulate in the forms built of matter, develop a set of magnetic stress. These having been developed, the material form can be discarded, and the system of stresses remains as an etheric mold. Thus does an inceptive idea pass through the plane of manifestation in matter and become a conceptive idea. There are many different devices employed for obtaining the same result, and though each of these owes its conception to a different inceptive idea, a different attempt to work out of a design, the conceptive idea of perfected action is the same for all, so that which was multiplicity in its origin, by the perfection of its development arrives at unity. One is the symbol of the first manifest or the absolute. Whatever reduces multiplicity to unity, or a complex concrete to a simple abstract, is approaching the center. The approach to the center is not a movement in space, but a unification. Now note the difference between unification and simplification, because this is the clue to much. Unification is achieved by evolution, and simplification is achieved by devolution. Unification is the final synthesis. Simplification is the ultimate analysis, or return to type. One is advancement to completion, the other a regression to the commencement. The concept of the return to center might be considered as an extension of the center, for when return to the center takes place, the center is thereby extended, and we are taught that the return to the center is the goal of evolution. If this idea be meditated upon, it will be seen that such a return to the center should involve the extension of the center. For if all that is external becomes internal, the boundary of the center must be extended. In very truth, it may be conceived that the return to the center means that the center is extended to the circumference and all things are as in the center. This implies the spiritualization of all the planes. Such a concept has two aspects, the form aspect and the force aspect. Force flows towards the center, withdrawing from the circumference. It therefore follows that the center, to accommodate it, must flow out. Thus it is that the substance of each plane, having had its native force withdrawn, is recast by the influence of the extending center into forms approximate to those which prevail upon the seventh plane. The withdrawing of force marks the end of a cosmic day and the beginning of a cosmic night. The outflowing of the center is the work of the cosmic night, and the secrets of the cosmic night have never hitherto been revealed. The outflow of pure spirit over all planes of matter takes place during the cosmic night, and all the archetypical forms remain in the vicinity of the magnetic stresses are thereby galvanized, but they have no real life, having as yet no reincarnating principle and therefore no memory. And at the end of the cosmic night, the spiritual tides withdraw, leaving the field to the emptiness of the cosmic dawn. But the forms over which the cosmic tide has flowed have been adjusted to cosmic stresses, and therefore all types of evil have been corrected. This is the cleansing of matter which takes place between each cosmic day, and neutralizes the force of inertia. And as the forces of inertia have their roots in the law of limitation, and the law of limitation has its root in cosmic evil, you will see the significance of the work of the cosmic night, and you will also see the deeper significance in the words, the power of darkness. It is necessary, if you are to understand the deeper implication of occultism, that you should see that the darkness leads through twilight to dawn, and the day leads through twilight to darkness. Good and evil may be conceived of as having areas of light and shadow through which a spinning ring revolves, and evil has its work to do as well as good. The God of light and the God of darkness are but the actions of the right and left hand of the Father. The right hand gives, and the left hand takes away. The right gives that which is to be, and the left takes away that which has been. The right sends out into manifestation, and the left beckons back again. But you, looking as in a mirror, call right left and left right. The attraction to the center takes place in the path of returning, and should that attraction set it prematurely, it causes the life to flow back to an earlier aspect. This involves a devolution of life before there is a devolution of form. When this returning flow takes place in relation to life, we see the development of parasitic types of existence. This explains the problem of bacterial disease. Other types of life, which are sapphoritic, are not of this evolution at all, but are functioning under the dominion of the lords of the dark face, who are the scavengers of the gods. You will perceive from the foregoing that a return to the center means a fading of a day of manifestation. And as the daylight fades, the spiritualizing darkness of the unmanifest flows over the field of matter. And this must always be borne in mind in considering this problem. For as the light withdraws from the outward circuit of the matter, so the spiritualizing influences begin to flow out from the innermost circuit of the spirit. And this process continues until such a time as light be withdrawn, and the concentric circles of manifestation be completely overflowed by the cleansing waters of darkness. But meanwhile, there is a transition stage during which the waters of darkness, which name is a symbol of spiritual peace, cleansing, and regeneration, make preparation for a new life. These waters, then, are percolating through the planes of manifestation, so that the seen will be interpenetrated by the unseen. This brings us to the second aspect of the subject of the attraction of the center, the question of initiation. 2. In relation to initiation, those entities that have returned to the center at the conclusion of their evolution flow out again as the forerunners of the shadow of the spirit. It is these who are the initiators. They themselves have been able to progress in advance of evolution by being themselves initiated, by developing entities of preceding evolutions according to the planes of which they took initiation. The lords of each plane being the completed fruits of the evolution, which had its culmination on that plane. These are the initiators of each evolution until those who are initiated themselves, having passed through the light, are proceeding outwards again. By the action of these entities, those who are initiated proceed from the surface to the substratum of their plane, and it is only when the waters of regeneration have penetrated through the cracks and fissures of receptive consciousness of a plane that initiation can take place on that plane. Thus it is that at this stage the great illumination can take place only out of the body, for in this phase of evolution the waters of regeneration have not yet reached the physical plane. 3. In relation to devolution, the attraction of the center has a third aspect in devolution, or the way of the left-hand path if applied to consciousness. In relation to evolution, devolution means the withdrawal of life from any given type of form, and the disintegration of the form. The systems of magnetic stress which life generated in them are then left as empty shells upon the etheric subplanes. These shells should await the cleansing of the waters of regeneration that flow out in the tides of the cosmic night. It sometimes happens, however, that souls which are sufficiently developed to have reached the point when they feel the attraction of the center upon the path of returning, and yet are insufficiently developed in certain aspects to be ready for evolution, because they have not yet sufficiently undergone involution, may set out to return to the center before they have passed the nadir. They will then be moving through planes from which the life is withdrawn, and wherein lie the empty shells awaiting the coming of the tides of the cosmic night. These souls will then avail themselves of these systems of magnetic stress of a primitive type for the expression of their functions. This will explain much if meditated upon. When, however, these souls have outgrown and destroyed the shells, and thereby impeded their subsequent evolution, continue on their devolutionary path, they reach a point where there are no more shells for their ensouling, and they will then be unable to maintain form, and will dissolve into the unorganized elements of substance, and cease to be potent for evil or potential for good. That is the record of the left-hand path. Evolution by the right-hand path is accomplished through the withdrawal of the perfected life from the forms which separate the synthesis of the principle which the forms were designed to express, the sublimation of the principles into ideals, and the realization of the ideals by the Logodial consciousness. Such is the record of evolution upon the right-hand path. It will be seen then that the essence of evolution is unification, and the manifestation of the unifactory principle upon the planes of manifestation is love. Whether that love be intellectual sympathy on the plane of the concrete mind, or physical unity on the plane of matter, love in all its aspect is the symbol of the Logos as one. The aim of evolution is to make all things one, and upon the planes of manifestation there are but two things which make all things one, death and love. Death is the manifestation of the left-hand path, and love is the manifestation of the right-hand path. Whoso loves, however dim may be his concept of love, is manifest in a unification, and unification is the goal of evolution. God is one. Love makes one, therefore it is truly said, God is love. Whosoever expresses love brings spirit, which is one, into manifestation. To be separate is to be dead. Therefore choose love and live. End of chapter.